Chapter 1. The Unexpected Encounter. The cold, metallic hum of the ship reverberated through the tight corridors of the Valiant Horizon. The ship, a human-built marvel, cut through the cosmic vastness like a spear, carrying its passengers to the farthest reaches of known space. Among those aboard was Lieutenant Alex Carter, a man who had dedicated his life to the stars. A simple mechanic by training, Alex was not a man of great ambition, at least, not until he was recruited into the United Earth Space Force. He had a knack for solving mechanical issues, something that made him invaluable to the crew. But when it came to the larger world beyond the confines of the ship, Alex had always been the quiet observer, someone who marveled at the universe without ever expecting it to take notice of him. His days on the ship were largely uneventful. Maintenance checks, routine operations, and the occasional alien encounter, which was becoming less of a rare event as humanity spread its wings across the cosmos. He had seen his fair share of alien species by now, some peaceful, some hostile, and some utterly indifferent to human existence. But nothing prepared him for what would happen during their scheduled stop at the edge of the Tauri system, a region of space famous for its ancient, almost mythological inhabitants. The Tauri people were known for their reclusiveness. Legends whispered that their empire had fallen into disarray centuries ago, but that remnants of their society still held sway over vast, uncharted worlds. Alex had only read about them in his downtime fantastical stories of towering warriors with glowing eyes, of cities built into the bones of mountains, and of their fierce, untamed nature. What was less known, however, was that a faction of Tauri still lived among the stars, scattered across different worlds, blending in with the more dominant galactic species. On this particular occasion, the Valiant Horizon was tasked with investigating a derelict station that had appeared on a forgotten moon orbiting one of Tauri's oldest colonies. No one had heard from the station in centuries, and the records were murky at best. Rumors swirled about its possible ties to an ancient Tauri princess who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The ship's mission was simple: investigate, retrieve any valuable data, and return home. But in the quiet recesses of the vessel, Alex had a strange feeling that something more was at play, something that he couldn't quite place. When the Valiant Horizon dropped out of hyperspace near the station, the first thing Alex noticed was the silence. No signal, no transmission. It was as if the station had been abandoned by both time and its creators. His team was tasked with entering the station and assessing its state, which seemed like a routine procedure. But there was an uncanny stillness to the place, a sort of unnatural calm that made his skin crawl as they boarded the station's airlock. The station's interior was eerily untouched by the decay that should have overtaken it after all these years. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, some depicting scenes of alien warfare, others showing strange rituals that Alex couldn't interpret. He wasn't trained for this kind of investigation, but he had a sharp eye for mechanics, so when his team's sensors began acting up, he instinctively moved to investigate the source. As he explored deeper into the station, he came across a large, sealed chamber. Its doors were unlike anything he had ever seen, solid, shimmering with a faint purple glow. The symbols etched into the door seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, almost as though the chamber itself was alive. His curiosity piqued. Alex activated the ship's scanners, but the results were inconclusive. There was no power signature, no source of energy that should have been causing the anomaly. It didn't make sense. There was no way this ancient station could be intact after all this time. But the door, whatever it was, held an allure that was impossible to resist. Without thinking, Alex ran his hand along the door's surface, tracing the strange symbols that seemed to shift beneath his fingertips. The air around him grew heavier, and then, as if answering an unspoken call, the door slowly began to open. The light that poured out from within was like nothing Alex had ever seen before, a blinding, pure white that left no shadows in its wake. And then, standing there in the center of the room, bathed in this impossible light, was a figure. At first, Alex thought it was a statue, one of the ancient Tauri relics he had read about. But as he blinked and focused his vision, he realized that the figure was very much alive. A woman, tall and statuesque, her skin shimmering like polished silver, her hair cascading in waves of radiant blue. Her eyes glowed with an ethereal luminescence, like twin moons set against the vastness of space. She stood there, observing him with a calm, calculating expression, as though waiting for someone. The shock hit him like a freight train, but his training kicked in. He quickly raised his hand in a gesture of peace, unsure of what else to do. The woman didn't move, but her eyes seemed to study him in return, her gaze penetrating, as though she was looking directly into his soul. "You are the human," she said, her voice smooth, melodic, yet carrying an underlying force. "I have been waiting for you." The words took a moment to process, but Alex's heart skipped a beat. "Waiting for me?" he asked, unable to mask the confusion in his voice. The woman stepped closer, her movements fluid, almost as if she was gliding across the floor. "Yes," she replied. "I am Lyra of the Towery, and I have come to you because I have no choice." Alex took a step back, uncertain. "What do you mean? I'm just here for a routine check." "I'm not Dash." "You are not just a mechanic," Lyra interrupted, her voice firm but still strangely soothing. "You are a man of destiny. The stars have brought you to me." For a moment, Alex couldn't understand what she meant, but there was an undeniable intensity in her presence. He felt as though his very existence was tied to hers in some way, some deep, inexplicable bond that was far beyond his comprehension. His logical mind told him to retreat, to leave this ancient mystery behind. But his heart told him to stay. Lyra took another step forward, her expression softening as she spoke. "I am the last of my kind, human. My people have fallen, and I am the last Towery to bear the name. My people chose me to be their ruler, their leader. But I was not meant to rule alone. There is a tradition among my people, one that you cannot understand unless you experience it." Alex stared at her, still uncertain, but intrigued. "What tradition?" he asked. "It is called the binding," she explained. "A Towery can only be united with another through a union of blood and heart. And I have waited long for one who could meet me in this way." The weight of her words settled heavily on Alex's shoulders. He felt the room seem to close in around him, the air growing thick and suffocating. He was a mechanic, an ordinary human, and yet, in this moment, he felt the incredible weight of destiny. "I don't understand," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from me?" Lyra's eyes, glowing even brighter now, held him captive. "What must I do to marry you, human?" she asked, her tone shifting from calm curiosity to something more urgent, as though she had already made her decision and now, it was his turn to decide. For the first time, Alex felt the full weight of his humanity in a universe full of unfathomable wonders. He was no longer just a mechanic, no longer just a man. He was part of something far greater than himself, something that would either bind him to a fate he could not predict or pull him into an abyss of the unknown. Alex stood frozen, caught in the shimmering gaze of Lyra. Her words reverberated in his mind like a pulse, insistent, powerful, and, somehow, strangely familiar. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, the questions swirling like a storm in his head. What did she mean by marriage? He wasn't prepared for this. He had never even considered the possibility of marrying an alien, let alone one who claimed to be the last of her kind. His whole life had been about fixing things, solving problems with gears, wires, and engines. Love? Marriage? That was something for other people, something he had never even dreamed about. But Lyra's eyes, they were like twin suns, burning with an intensity that made it impossible for him to look away. She was serious. She was waiting for him to respond, and in her gaze, Alex saw something else, a desperation, a need that went beyond the words she had spoken. It wasn't about love, not in the way humans understood it. No, this was something ancient, something sacred, something that resonated with the deepest part of him. "What do you mean?" Alex stammered, his voice barely a whisper as he stepped back, his mind racing. "Why me?" "I have told you," Lyra answered, her voice calm, yet with an edge of finality. "I am the last of my kind, and I have been waiting for the one who would be strong enough to fulfill the binding. It is a rite older than the stars themselves, one that must be completed by two who are destined to unite. I have waited for centuries, and now you stand before me. The stars have chosen you, human." The certainty in her voice was unsettling, and the idea that the universe, whatever that even meant, had chosen him for this, it sounded like madness. He was a mechanic. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't even the best at his job. But there was no mistaking it. There was something in the air, something charged between them, a pull that Alex couldn't resist. Lyra took a step closer, her presence overwhelming, yet not threatening. There was a grace in her movements, an elegance in the way she stood, as if she were always poised to move through space and time with the same effortless beauty. The flickering light from the chamber bounced off her skin, casting shifting patterns around them. It was surreal. "I don't understand," Alex muttered, trying to gather his thoughts, still unable to pull away from her piercing gaze. "You're asking me to marry you, but this is impossible. I'm just a guy. I don't know anything about your traditions, your people." Lyra reached out then, placing a cool hand on his arm, her touch sending a spark of electricity through him. "It is not about what you know, Alex. It is about what you feel. You are not just a man, and I am not just an alien. Together, we can shape the future of both our worlds. You have no idea what your answer could mean." Her words were both an invitation and a command, laden with the weight of destiny. He could feel the seriousness in her tone, the urgency behind her words. There was something ancient in her eyes, something he couldn't ignore. He wasn't sure if it was fear or awe, or both, but whatever it was, it kept him rooted in place. Alex took a deep breath, his mind struggling to process the situation. "What do you need from me? What happens if I say yes? What's the binding exactly?" Lyra's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, but there was a touch of warmth in it nonetheless. "The binding is a ritual, one that involves two souls, one of Towery and one of human, uniting in a bond that is eternal. It is not a mere marriage, Alex. It is a connection that transcends time. It binds not just our fates, but the very essence of our beings. Through the binding, our powers will be combined, and we will become something more than we are alone. It is a force that has the potential to heal not just me, but my people." His heart raced as the magnitude of her words settled in. He was just a mechanic, a fixer of engines. Could he really be the one to heal a people? Could he truly be the key to something this profound? His rational mind screamed at him to walk away, to reject this impossible offer. But in his chest, something stirred. Was it curiosity? Or something deeper, more primal? "I don't know if I'm the right person," Alex finally said, his voice trembling. "I'm not some hero. I can't promise you something like that." Lyra's expression softened, but there was still a fire in her eyes. "You are more than you believe, Alex. You will see that soon enough." Chapter 2. The Binding. The following days aboard the Valiant Horizon were a blur for Alex. After his encounter with Lyra, he was both shaken and intrigued. He had returned to the ship with more questions than answers, his mind spinning with the weight of the alien woman's words. The rest of the crew, unaware of what had transpired, continued their duties. But for Alex, nothing had been the same since that moment in the ancient Towery station. Lyra had insisted he take time to think, to make his decision. She was not an aggressive woman, not in the way Alex had imagined alien encounters to be. Instead, she was patient, even kind, and her presence seemed to linger in his thoughts, always at the periphery of his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her tall, graceful, glowing with an otherworldly light, waiting for him to make the choice. As the hours turned into days, Alex tried to distance himself from the overwhelming emotions that Lyra had stirred in him. But it was futile. He couldn't escape her presence, not even within the confines of the Valiant Horizon. She had given him a gift, a connection to something far greater than his understanding, and the pull was magnetic. He found himself increasingly restless, torn between the familiar safety of his ordinary life and the dangerous allure of the unknown. One evening, unable to focus on the endless tasks before him, Alex found himself walking toward the section of the ship where Lyra had been staying. It was an area kept away from the rest of the crew, a place where she could remain undisturbed. As he approached her quarters, his footsteps echoed against the steel floor, a constant reminder that he was about to step into a reality he couldn't yet comprehend. He reached her door and hesitated, his hand hovering over the control panel. Was he ready to make this choice? Was he really willing to commit to something that could change the course of both their lives forever? Before he could press the button, the door slid open. Lyra stood in the threshold, her eyes searching his face as if she had been waiting for this very moment. "You have made your decision," she said softly, her voice like a gentle caress. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Alex swallowed hard. I I need to understand more about what this means, Lyra. I've never done anything like this before. Lyra stepped closer, the warmth of her presence enveloping him. I know, Alex. You are not expected to understand everything all at once. But I will help you. The binding is not only a bond between us, it is a journey. And I will guide you every step of the way. The words hung in the air like a promise, one that Alex knew he couldn't refuse. With a deep breath, he nodded, a sense of resolve settling in his chest. I'm ready, he said, though he wasn't entirely sure if he believed it. I'll do it. I'll marry you. Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time since their meeting, Alex saw the vulnerability in her eyes. She was no longer the confident, enigmatic figure that had entered his life. She was someone who had placed her faith in him, someone who had chosen him as her partner in a way that transcended the superficial. This wasn't just about a human and an alien, it was about two souls coming together to forge something new. Then it begins, Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The binding begins now. And with that, Alex stepped into the unknown. The days following Alex's decision were filled with a strange combination of anticipation and dread. Lyra had taken him to a private chamber within the valiant horizon, one that seemed to hum with a life of its own. The walls were adorned with symbols and designs that Alex couldn't understand, glowing faintly in the dim light. The room had an otherworldly energy to it, and as he stepped inside, Alex felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a heavy cloak. Lyra had explained that the binding was a ceremonial rite, but it was more than just a ritual. It was a fusion of two beings of their souls, their essences. She had told him that his body and mind would undergo a transformation, one that would change him forever, just as it would change her. The connection they would form was ancient and sacred, a force that would entwine their fates together in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. He had agreed to this, but now, standing before Lyra in the strange chamber, Alex found himself questioning his decision. His hand felt cold as he reached out for hers, the realization settling in that there was no turning back. Lyra's touch, warm and sure, anchored him, her grip firm but gentle. Are you ready? She asked, her voice soft but intense, carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. I think so, Alex replied, his voice hoarse with uncertainty. He wasn't sure if there was such a thing as ready for something like this. How could one prepare for a bond that transcended time, that was both spiritual and physical? How could a simple mechanic understand the ancient forces that had shaped the Tauri people? Lyra gave him a reassuring smile, though there was a deep sadness in her eyes, an echo of something that Alex couldn't place. You have already proven more than you know. Now let us begin. The air around them seemed to thrum with energy as Lyra raised her hands, her fingers tracing the air in intricate patterns. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, their light pulsing in rhythm with her movements. Alex felt a tremor pass through him, as if the room itself was alive, watching, waiting. Close your eyes, Lyra instructed, her voice soft like a breeze. Trust me. He obeyed, shutting his eyes, and almost immediately, he felt a strange sensation sweep over him. It wasn't physical, not in the way a touch or a movement would be, but more like a presence, an awareness that expanded within his mind. It was as if he was no longer just Alex Carter, a human mechanic. He was something more, something infinite. Images flickered behind his closed eyelids, visions of distant stars, of strange planets, of ancient battles fought in the shadows of forgotten worlds. He saw Lyra in these visions, her figure standing tall against a backdrop of burning skies and alien landscapes, leading her people through an era of prosperity and then through the dark days of their decline. Her history intertwined with his own, and he felt something deep within him stir in response. Her pain, her loss, her determination, it was all there, embedded in the fabric of the universe, waiting to be shared. And then, as if guided by an unseen force, the visions faded, and in the silence that followed, Alex felt a deep connection to Lyra, a bond that was more than physical, more than emotional. It was something that reached into the very essence of who they were. He could feel her heartbeat in his chest, her breath in his lungs, her thoughts brushing against his own. They were no longer two separate beings. They were one. The sensation was overwhelming. He gasped, his hands trembling, as he reached for her, needing to ground himself in this strange new reality. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was standing before him, her expression soft but filled with a quiet intensity. "You are mine now, and I am yours," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Alex didn't know how to respond. The weight of her words settled heavily in his chest. He had agreed to this, but now that the binding had begun, he wasn't sure what it meant. What would it mean for his future? What would it mean for Earth? The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and mysteries, and Alex had no idea where this journey would take them. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice cracking with the intensity of the moment. Lyra smiled, her eyes gleaming with a mix of sadness and hope. "You don't have to say anything. You've already shown me what matters most, your willingness to trust. That is all I need." Alex nodded slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. This was just the beginning, he realized. There was so much more to this connection than he could possibly understand in this moment. But one thing was certain. He had made a choice, and there was no going back. Chapter 3: A New Beginning. The days following the binding were both a blur and an eternity. Alex had thought he understood what was happening. He had agreed to marry Lyra, to become bound to her in ways that transcended the physical world. But what he had not anticipated was the profound effect the ritual would have on him. It wasn't just his thoughts that had changed. He felt different in ways he couldn't explain. It was as though the world itself had shifted, and he was now part of something greater than himself. He could hear Lyra's voice in his mind, even when she wasn't speaking, feel her emotions as if they were his own. Her thoughts were clearer to him now, and his thoughts, though still his own, seemed to be intertwined with hers. It was a constant presence, like the hum of an engine in the background, a reminder that he was no longer alone in his mind. But it wasn't just mental. Alex could feel the power coursing through his body. His muscles felt stronger, his senses sharper. Colors were more vibrant, sounds were clearer, and even the air felt thicker, more alive. He had been transformed, but how much of it was real, and how much was the result of the connection with Lyra? He couldn't say. Lyra had not told him what to expect. She had only shared her thoughts and memories with him, allowing him to see the weight of her past. He had seen the glory of the Towery people at their peak, their culture and power, and he had felt their tragic fall. He had felt her pain, her burden, as the last of her kind. It was a burden that had shaped every decision she had made, every choice she had taken. She had been alone for so long, and now she had bound herself to him, a human mechanic who had never imagined such a fate. As the days passed, Alex found himself drawn more and more to Lyra. Her presence in his mind was both comforting and unsettling. He had never known anyone like her. Her strength, her wisdom, her beauty. She was everything he had never thought possible, and yet, she had chosen him. He could feel the weight of her choices as if they were his own. One evening, as the valiant Horizon drifted through space, heading toward an uncharted world, Lyra approached him in the ship's observation deck. The stars stretched out before them, a vast sea of possibilities. "You are still uncertain," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Alex turned to face her, the weight of her words settling in his chest. "I don't know what's happening to me, Lyra. I don't know how to handle this. I've always been just a guy, a mechanic, and now, I'm part of something I can't even begin to understand." Lyra stepped closer, her gaze never leaving his face. "You are not just a mechanic, Alex. You are the bridge between our worlds. You are the future of the Towery people, whether you realize it or not. The binding has begun, and it will lead us down a path we cannot turn from. But you are not alone. We will walk this path together." Alex felt a deep, stirring connection to her, something that went beyond words. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a man. He was something more, something that was still unfolding. And as the stars passed by, he realized that his journey had just begun. The weeks that followed were a strange amalgamation of discovery, uncertainty, and growth. Alex's transformation was both exhilarating and terrifying. The power that surged through his veins was something he had never known. His body felt different, stronger, as if he had been forged anew. His senses had heightened. He could hear the faintest hum of machinery, feel the vibrations of the ship in a way that made him hyper-aware of everything around him. But it wasn't just his physicality that had changed. His mind was a tangled mess of thoughts and emotions, his and Lyra's. They were one now, connected in a way that was both comforting and disorienting. He could feel her every shift, every thought, as if they were his own. Her sadness, her longing for her lost people, her hope, her strength, everything was there, flowing through him, as if her soul had become an extension of his. At times, it felt overwhelming, but in other moments, it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. He could hear her voice in his mind at all hours, guiding him, reassuring him. And yet, there were still moments of doubt. Was he really ready for this? Was he prepared to be bound to her for eternity, to carry the weight of the Towery people on his shoulders? The connection between them grew deeper with each passing day. Lyra taught him about her people, their history, their traditions, their struggles. He learned that the Towery had once been a mighty race, their empire spanning galaxies, their influence unmatched. But it had all crumbled, torn apart by internal strife and external forces. Lyra was the last of her people, the last hope for their legacy. And now, she was bound to him, a human mechanic with no knowledge of the galaxy's grand designs. At first, Alex had tried to keep his distance, to focus on the ship's maintenance, the tasks that had once given his life structure. But with every passing day, it became harder to ignore the pull between them. Lyra wasn't just the last of her kind. She was the embodiment of everything he had never expected to find in the vastness of space. She was a queen without a kingdom, a warrior without an army, and yet, she had chosen him. It was humbling, terrifying, and in some ways, it made him feel more alive than he had ever felt before. One evening, as the ship coasted through the emptiness of deep space, Lyra took him aside. Her gaze was intense, and for the first time since the binding, Alex saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Alex," she began, her voice steady but laden with emotion, "you are not just a human to me. You are my partner, my equal. The binding between us is not just a union of bodies, it is a union of purpose. Together, we can restore what was lost. Together, we can lead the Towery people back to greatness." Alex felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He had never imagined himself as a leader, never dreamed of carrying the fate of an entire species. But now, as he looked into her eyes, he realized something: he had already become part of her world, and it was no longer a question of whether he was ready. It was a question of what kind of man he would become in the process. "I don't know what the future holds, Lyra," Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. "But I know one thing for sure. I can't do this alone. I need you. You're right, we're not just two people. We're something more now." Lyra smiled, her expression softening. "And we will face it together." Chapter 4: The Legacy of the Towery. The days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the bond between Alex and Lyra grew stronger. They began to form a plan not just for themselves, but for the galaxy. The Towery were not gone. They had simply been scattered, broken. It was their legacy that remained, and Alex knew that he and Lyra could restore it. But it would require more than just their unity. It would require allies, allies from across the galaxy, who could see the potential in what they were building. Alex had always thought of himself as just a mechanic. He had never wanted to be a leader, never sought to change the galaxy. But now, standing at Lyra's side, he realized that the fate of the Towery, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested in their hands. Together, they journeyed across the stars, seeking the scattered remnants of the Towery people, gathering those who would stand with them. They found former warriors, scholars, and diplomats Towery who had survived in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reclaim their place in the galaxy. With each new ally, their vision expanded, and the Towery's lost empire began to take shape once more. It wasn't easy. There were battles to fight, alliances to forge, and old enemies to face. But Alex and Lyra were united not just by the binding, but by a shared purpose. They were determined to restore the Towery's legacy, not as rulers, but as stewards of a future that was yet to be written. As the months passed, the valiant Horizon became their home, a symbol of their new alliance. The ship was no longer just a vessel for exploration. It was a beacon of hope. Alex, the once simple mechanic, had become a leader, a diplomat, and a protector. He had learned to navigate the complexities of the galaxy's politics, to rally forces and make decisions that would shape the future. But through it all, he never forgot the person who had started him on this path, Lyra. She was not just his partner in the binding, but his equal in every way. Together, They had become something greater than the sum of their parts. They were a force of change, a symbol of unity between two species that had once been divided by the vastness of space. As the final battle drew near, Alex stood on the bridge of the valiant horizon, staring out into the endless expanse of stars. He had come a long way from the man who had first stepped onto this ship, unsure of his place in the universe. Now, he understood that he was part of something much larger than himself. And with Lyra by his side, he knew that the future was theirs to shape. "Are you ready?" Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts, soft and steady as ever. Alex turned to her, his heart swelling with pride. "I am," he said, his voice unwavering. "With you, I'm ready for anything." And together, they stepped forward into the unknown, their bond unbreakable, their future limitless. The legacy of the Towery would live on, not through bloodlines or empires, but through the strength of those who dared to defy the darkness of the galaxy and embrace the light of unity. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibilities. And as they moved forward, side by side, Alex realized that the real journey had only just begun.